The sun had barely dipped below the horizon when I pulled into the driveway of my home in Crestwood Meadows, a manicured suburban enclave in suburban Virginia. After a grueling 14-hour day consulting on a corporate security project, all I wanted was a cold beer and the comfort of my own couch. But as I fumbled with my key at the front door, it refused to turn. I tried again, twisting harder. Nothing. The lock was different, shiny, new, and utterly foreign. Taped to the door was a red notice from the Crestwood Meadows Homeowners Association. HOA contact HOA office for new keys. Security intervention fee, $750. Emergency processing fee, $500. I stood there, stunned, my exhaustion giving way to a slow-burning rage. The HOA had changed my locks while I was at work, locking me out of my own home. The audacity was staggering, but what they didn't know was that I, Daniel Harper, had designed the entire security system for this house. Every camera, sensor, and hidden microphone was my creation, and they'd been recording every move the HOA made. Their abuse of power was about to become their undoing. 3 years ago, I'd moved to Crestwood Meadows after landing a lucrative contract with a national security firm. The neighborhood was the kind of place where every lawn was pristine, every mailbox matched, and the cars in the driveways cost more than most people's annual salaries. I'd spent years in cramped apartments, so buying this house at 42, Maple Lane was a milestone. My first real home, a symbol of breaking free from the renter's life my parents had known. I poured months into renovating it, installing a state-of-the-art security system that blended seamlessly into the decor. To the untrained eye, it was just cameras and a smart lock. But hidden in plain sight were backup sensors in the trim, cameras disguised as garden ornaments, and a secondary monitoring system that operated independently. My career in security wasn't just a job. It was a calling, sparked in college when a thief stole my roommate's laptop, erasing his thesis. That loss drove me to build systems that protected what mattered most. Crestwood Meadows seemed perfect at first. The walking trails, community pool, and annual block party justified the $300 monthly HOA fee, or so I thought. I even joined the neighborhood watch, offering tips on securing homes, but my suggestions were politely ignored. The first sign of trouble came 6 months in when I received a letter from the HOA about my front porch planters. Apparently, my blue ceramic pots violated the approved aesthetic guidelines, and the marigolds I planted were the wrong shade of yellow for the fall season. I laughed it off, thinking it was a neighborly prank. It wasn't. A week later, a $50 fine arrived. That's when I decided to attend my first HOA meeting. The meeting was run by Margaret Ellison, the HOA president, a woman in her mid-50s with a polished bob and a smile that never reached her eyes. She commanded the room like a drill sergeant, shutting down questions and rushing through a financial report so fast no one could follow. That night, she announced a special community fund requiring each household to contribute $1,500 for unspecified upgrades. When I asked for a breakdown of the costs, the room went silent. Margaret's smile tightened as she dismissed my question, saying the board had already vetted the expenses. Her stare lingered on me, a warning I didn't fully grasp until later. After the meeting, a woman named Susan Carter pulled me aside in the parking lot. "Don't cross Margaret," she whispered. The last guy who questioned her budget got buried in fines until he sold his house and left. Over the next week, I noticed a shift. Neighbors who'd once waved now avoided eye contact. Invitations to barbecues stopped. Then came an email singling me out as the only resident who hadn't paid into the special fund, followed by a call from Margaret herself. Her voice dripped with false sweetness as she reminded me that community spirit was a Crestwood value. That night, I checked my security footage and froze. At 2 a.m., 2 nights earlier, someone had been in my yard, inspecting my door and windows. The figure's limp matched that of Henry Vaughn, the HOA's vice president. This wasn't a prank, it was surveillance. I spent the next few hours assessing my home's vulnerabilities, ordering reinforced locks and additional hidden cameras. If the HOA wanted to play games, they'd pick the wrong opponent. By morning, I drafted a 3-phase security plan and started a log of every HOA interaction. Something told me I need every shred of evidence. The fines kept coming. My grass was too long at 2.6 inches, $100. My trash can was misplaced by 6 inches, $100. Within 2 weeks, I'd racked up $900 in penalties, each more absurd than the last. Susan, a real estate lawyer, wasn't surprised when we met for coffee. Margaret's known for this, she said. She wears people down until they pay or leave. She told me about a neighbor, Javier Morales, who'd faced similar harassment after questioning a shady landscaping deal. I started documenting everything: photos of my lawn, measurements of my trash can's position, timestamps of every HOA email. If they wanted to play by the rules, I'd master the rulebook. Digging into the HOA's bylaws, I found discrepancies. The official county records didn't match the version residents received, which gave the board unchecked power over properties. Financial reports showed payments to non-existent vendors, some linked to Margaret's relatives. Most alarming, the HOA had placed liens on 6 homes in 4 years, an unheard-of frequency for a neighborhood like ours. Margaret wasn't just a control freak. She was running a racket. I installed 4 more hidden cameras with night vision and cloud storage, ensuring the footage couldn't be altered. In my home office, I set up a computer to log every HOA email, backing them up to 3 secure servers. My father's old saying echoed in my mind: hope for peace, but prepare for war. This was starting to feel like the latter. One evening, I spotted Henry Vaughn and Tom Reynolds, the HOA's locksmith, parked across from my house in a black SUV, watching me. A police cruiser driven by Officer Michael Thompson passed by, giving me a nod, but not stopping. I later learned he'd been suspicious of Henry, a former cop with a questionable past, but lacked evidence to act. When I ignored the fines, Margaret sent a letter threatening a lien on my property. That night, my cameras caught Henry and Tom prowling my yard after midnight, testing windows and snapping photos. I called Susan. "They're building a case against you," she warned. "Margaret's got connections at the county courthouse. Be careful." Instead of retreating, I doubled down. I set up a decoy Wi-Fi network with weak security, planted a fake external hard drive with bogus financial data, and left careless banking papers visible through my office window. I was building a honeypot, a trap to catch them overreaching. The next morning, an urgent HOA letter demanded I pay all fines plus late fees within 48 hours or face a lien. My security app pinged. Night vision footage showed Tom measuring my backyard. Susan was worried. "They've driven out families before, Daniel. They won't stop." I smiled. "I'm counting on that." The HOA's audacity was no longer a surprise, but their next move pushed me to the edge. 2 days after their urgent letter, I had to leave for a 3-day business trip to Seattle, a critical meeting with a client I couldn't reschedule. Before I left, I asked my neighbor, Javier Morales, to keep an eye on my place. I also finalized my Falcon Watch protocol, a comprehensive surveillance system that could operate remotely. Hidden cameras, motion sensors, and audio recorders ran on cellular backups, independent of my home's power or internet. I had a gut feeling the HOA would strike while I was gone, and I wasn't wrong. On the second night, during a client dinner, my security app buzzed. Live footage showed Henry Vaughn and Tom Reynolds creeping toward my back door at 12:17 a.m., flashlights in hand. "This is perfect," Henry whispered, his voice clear through my audio feed. "He's gone until tomorrow. Do it clean. It needs to look official." I watched, heart pounding, as Tom picked my lock with unnerving skill. They slipped inside, and I activated every interior camera. For 2 hours, they tore through my house. They didn't just check the water heater, their supposed emergency excuse. They ransacked my office, photographed documents, and plugged a device into my computer, likely copying my hard drive. "Check this out," Tom said, holding up a folder labeled Security Blueprints. "This is the whole neighborhood setup. Worth a fortune to the right buyer." What they didn't know was that those blueprints were a decoy, laced with flaws that would sabotage any system built from them. I'd planted them months ago, anticipating a breach. Their casual chatter revealed something darker. This wasn't their first illegal entry. They mentioned inspections at Javier's house and another neighbor, Ellen Friedman, joking about items Tom had acquired. Henry had a list of targets, tax returns, investment records, anything tied to my security contracts. At one point, Tom found my fake investment portfolio, claiming I had $3.2 million in tech stocks. Henry's eyes gleamed in the infrared footage. "Jackpot," he muttered. "Margaret's gonna love this." I fought the urge to call the police. Acting now would tip my hand before I had enough to dismantle the entire HOA board. Instead, I documented every second, timestamping the footage and saving it to multiple cloud servers. When I landed back in Virginia, I drove home, only to find my front door replaced with a slightly off-color one. The red HOA notice mocked me. "Contact HOA office for new keys." An email claimed an emergency intervention due to a gas leak, justifying the lock change and fees. A black SUV idled down the street, watching me. When I made eye contact, it sped off. Susan met me at the house, along with Javier. "This is illegal," Susan said, reading the notice. "They can't enter your home or change locks without proper notice." Javier confirmed no gas company trucks had been around. As we strategized, Henry pulled up, exuding fake concern. "Gas leaks are serious, Mr. Harper," he said. "We had to act fast for the neighborhood's safety." When I asked for the inspection report, he dodged. "It's being processed. Pay the fees, and you'll get everything." Officer Thompson cruised by, eyeing Henry, who softened his tone. "Settle up tomorrow at 9 a.m., Henry said before leaving. My hand shook, not from fear but fury. I told Susan I'd stay at a hotel, playing the defeated homeowner. In reality, I spent the night in a budget motel, combing through the footage. The violation was staggering. They'd spent 45 minutes in my office, opening drawers, mail, even my medicine cabinet. Greg had installed keylogging software on my computer, while Henry photographed every document on my desk. They spent less than 2 minutes near the water heater, never touching it. The gas leak was a lie. One clip chilled me. Henry called Margaret during the break-in. "We're at Harper's place," he said. "Got everything we need to move forward." Margaret's reply was muffled, but Henry's next words were clear. "He'll be begging to sell by next month." This wasn't just harassment. It was a coordinated plan to force me out. Why my house? I needed answers. The next morning, I paid the $1,250 in fees at the HOA office, swallowing my pride as Margaret handed me the keys with a crocodile tear smile. "Safety first, Mr. Harper," she said. Back home, the invasion scope hit me. Drawers were ajar, papers shuffled, my computer tampered with, though my security protocols had blocked any breach. Fingerprint dust coated my office surfaces, suggesting they were building a case to frame me. They'd even checked under my mattress. It felt personal, like they were trying to erase me. I fortified my home, adding interior locks, pressure sensors under floorboards, and reinforced door frames. I was locking the barn after the horse was stolen, but I wanted them to try again. Next time, my system would bury them. For 2 weeks, I played the model resident, paying fines, smiling at HOA events, and volunteering for the newsletter. Margaret beamed, thinking she'd broken me. Behind the scenes, I launched Operation Falcon Watch, targeting the HOA leadership. I planted micro cameras in the community clubhouse, motion-activated audio recorders near Margaret's office, and exploited a vulnerability in their email server. The evidence was damning. At a late-night meeting at Margaret's house, she accepted a cash-filled envelope from a man in a suit, later identified as a developer. "The special fund's almost ready," she told him. "We'll push the sale through without a vote." Henry discussed forcing me out, saying, "Harper knows too much." The HOA secretary, Linda Monroe, falsified financial reports to hide their theft. My network analysis mapped their communications, revealing ties to shell companies and developers. Emails between board members outlined targeting problem homeowners with fake violations. My name appeared often, labeled a troublemaker, needing special handling. One email from Margaret to Henry read, "Harper's background makes him dangerous. If fines don't work, we'll get creative." My security expertise made me their worst nightmare. I uncovered their motive. My corner lot house bordered the community park's eastern section, which they planned to sell for $1 million. An access road for the development would run through my property. If they forced me out, they'd buy my house cheap through a shell company, demolish it, and cash in. The harassment wasn't random. It was a land grab. I adjusted my strategy, focusing surveillance on Margaret's home office and weekly board meetings. Using directional microphones and long-range cameras, I captured Margaret saying, "Once Harper's gone, we can finalize the Easter parcel deal." The developer's offering an extra $200,000 for the corner lot. Henry replied, "With the fines, liens, and what we found on his computer, he'll be out in 30 days. To keep my cover, I played the broken homeowner, volunteering for cleanup crews and nodding at Margaret's speeches. At a community dinner, she put her arm around me for a photo, preaching about standards. I smiled, my pen recorder capturing every word. The strain was real. I checked my blinds obsessively, added bedroom locks, and woke at every creak. My quest to protect my home had turned me into a paranoid sentinel, but I had the skills to fight back. The psychological toll of living a double life, meek homeowner by day, covert operative by night, was wearing me down. Every creak in the house jolted me awake, and I developed a habit of triple-checking my locks before bed. But each sleepless night fueled my resolve. Margaret Ellison and her HOA cronies weren't just bullying me. They were preying on an entire community. I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting for every neighbor they'd driven out and those they'd target next. My surveillance operation, dubbed Falcon Watch, was yielding a goldmine of evidence. The micro cameras in the Crestwood Meadows clubhouse captured board members discussing their scheme openly, assuming they were safe. One recording showed Linda Monroe, the HOA secretary, forging financial records to hide payments to a shell company tied to Margaret's late husband's estate. Another caught Henry Vaughn bragging about teaching Harper a lesson by piling on fines. The most damning was a conversation at Margaret's house, where she outlined the land deal. The developer's ready to pay $1 million for the eastern parcel. Harper's lot is the last piece. Once he's out, we're set. I traced their scheme's history. Over 4 years, they'd forced 6 families to sell their homes through relentless harassment, fake violations, escalating fines, even liens. Each property was snapped up by one of 3 investment firms, all linked to a holding company partially owned by Margaret's family. The pattern was clear: drive out residents, buy low through shell companies, then resell high or hold for future development. My house, sitting on the corner lot critical to the developer's access road, was their final hurdle. To expose them, I needed undeniable proof of their intent to force me out. I intensified surveillance on Margaret's weekly strategy sessions, using long-range microphones hidden in a neighbor's hedge. One night, I recorded Henry saying, "Harper's playing nice now, but we need him gone before the developer's deadline." The fake portfolio we found gives us leverage. $3 million in assets? We can squeeze him. Margaret's voice cut in. "If he doesn't break, we'll make sure he does. Tom's got ideas." The mention of Tom Reynolds, the locksmith with a criminal past, sent a chill through me. Playing the submissive resident was excruciating. At a neighborhood barbecue, Margaret publicly mocked me, calling me a reformed troublemaker, while neighbors laughed nervously. I kept my head down, letting my sister, Emily, who was visiting, live-stream the moment discreetly. "You're playing a dangerous game," Emily whispered later, helping me sort footage in my basement command center. "What if they escalate beyond fines?" I sighed, doubts creeping in. If I walk away, who stops them from doing this to someone else? Susan Carter, my lawyer ally, had become fully invested after witnessing the lockout. "What they did was criminal," she said. "And you're not their first victim." She reviewed my evidence, confirming it was enough for a civil case, but urging me to aim higher: criminal charges. Javier Morales, who'd faced similar harassment, fed me intel about past HOA schemes. Even Ellen Friedman, a seemingly neutral neighbor, admitted Margaret had pressured her to sell after she questioned a maintenance contract. My coalition was growing, bolstered by Officer Michael Thompson, who'd been watching Henry's late-night prowling and was ready to act once I had solid proof. My basement had transformed into a war room. Monitors displayed live feeds from the clubhouse, Margaret's office, and my property. Neighborhood maps marked HOA targets, and a timeline correlated board actions with property sales. The web was tightening, but the riskiest part lay ahead, catching them in the act of something so blatant it would force law enforcement's hand. In early May, the HOA announced a safety inspection of my home, scheduled for the exact time Margaret was meeting the developer at the local country club. The timing wasn't a coincidence. They wanted me distracted. To make matters worse, Margaret launched a smear campaign, painting me as a disruptive resident in the community newsletter and a local paper. A once friendly neighbor, Carol, sent me a note saying she couldn't associate with me anymore. The isolation stung, but I had to stay focused. I devised a plan to be in two places at once. I'll rig the house to look occupied, I told Javier. Motion-triggered recordings of me walking, lights on timers, and a fake intercom response would fool the inspector. Meanwhile, I'd monitor the developer meeting from Javier's house, using a telephoto lens and directional microphone. The setup was risky. If the inspector got suspicious, my cover could blow. But the meeting was my best shot at catching Margaret red-handed. The night before, I uncovered something chilling about Tom Reynolds. He wasn't just a locksmith. He'd been stealing from homes during inspections for years, protected by Henry's influence. A USB drive he'd taken from my office, rigged with tracking software, showed him visiting multiple homes late at night. I'd left that drive out deliberately, knowing it would tempt him. Susan reviewed my legal case, her voice firm. If we get evidence from tomorrow's meeting, we can go to the district attorney. But be careful. Henry's dangerous when cornered. I barely slept, questioning if this fight was worth it. I could sell, take the loss, and start over. But the thought of Margaret's next victim, a family without my resources, kept me going. The next morning, the inspection began as planned. My automation system worked flawlessly, simulating my presence while I set up a Javier's, 200 yards for the country club. Through my lens, I saw Margaret, Henry, and Linda meet a man in a tailored suit. "The eastern parcel's yours once we clear the hurdles," Margaret said, pocketing another envelope. "The special fund covers the prep work, and residents don't read the fine print." The developer hesitated. "What about that security guy asking questions?" Margaret's reply was ice cold. "Harper won't be a problem much longer. We've got something planned for him this weekend." My pulse raced. What were they plotting? Before I could process it, my security app pinged. The inspector, Tom Reynolds, was off script, accessing my bedroom closet, an area not on the inspection list. Switching to my home feed, I watched him damage an electrical outlet and plant a small package, likely drugs, behind my clothes. They weren't just harassing me, they were framing me for a crime. As I grappled with this, Ellen called. "Daniel, get back now." Henry left the meeting early. "Ant's heading to your place with Officer Collins." Not Thompson, but Collins, Henry's old partner. "They're talking about a drug tip." My plan was unraveling. If Henry and Collins found the planted drugs, I could face arrest. "I'm coming," I told Ellen, grabbing my gear. "Send the meeting footage to Thompson and call Susan." The stakes had skyrocketed. This wasn't about fines anymore. It was about my freedom. I sped back, parking 2 blocks away and sneaking through backyards to my house. Tom was slipping out my back door as I entered through a hidden panel I'd installed for emergencies. He didn't see me, too focused on escaping. Inside, I activated my real security grid. Not the decoy Tom had tampered with, but the Viper's Nest protocol, which had recorded his every move. I uploaded the footage of him planting drugs to a secure server and prepped for Henry's arrival. Henry and Officer Collins pounded on my door minutes later. Through my feed, I saw Margaret watching from a car across the street, her face smug. I opened the door, feigning confusion. "Officer, is something wrong?" Collins was all business. "We got a tip about suspicious activity. We need to look around." Henry, smirking, added, "Just routine, Harper. I'm here for HOA liability." His fake concern was nauseating, but I stayed calm. Of course, though I'm curious why the HOA's involved in a police matter. As they moved through my house, Henry subtly steered Collins toward the closet. "Check there," he said casually. Old houses sometimes hide contraband. Collins gave him a strange look, but complied. Right then, my doorbell rang. Susan, perfect timing. That's my attorney, I said, opening the door. Susan strode in, legal pad in hand. May I ask the ground for this search, officer? Do you have a warrant? Collins shifted uncomfortably. An anonymous tip. Susan cut in. That's not enough to enter a private home without a warrant, as you know. The room's dynamic flipped. Collins grew cautious, Henry visibly nervous. As they stepped toward the door, I hit a button on my phone. My living room TV lit up with footage of Tom planting the drugs 30 minutes earlier. Before you go, you might want to see this, I said, pointing. I've got more. Henry and Tom breaking in, copying my drives, rifling through my papers. Henry's face went white. That's doctored, he stammered. But Collins, watching Tom hide the package, was already on his radio, calling for backup. The air in my living room crackled with tension as Officer Collins stared at the TV screen, watching Tom Reynolds plant drugs in my closet. Henry Vaughn stammered denial. That's doctored. Hung in the air, weak and desperate. Susan Carter stood beside me, her lawyer's poise unwavering, but I could see the glint of triumph in her eyes. Collins lowered his radio, his expression hardening. I need to call this in, he said, stepping outside. Henry moved toward the door, but I wasn't done. Oh, and Henry, I said, my voice steady, tell Margaret that Officer Thompson has the footage from your meeting with the developer, kickbacks, land sale, all of it. Henry froze, his smug facade crumbling. Through my security feed, I saw Margaret in her car across the street, her face tightening as she realized something was wrong. Collins returned, now joined by another officer, and the situation escalated fast. Mr. Harper, we'll need your statement and access to that footage, Collins said, his tone professional but urgent. Henry tried to slip out, muttering about HOA business, but Collins stopped him. You're staying right here, Vaughn. Within an hour, Officer Michael Thompson arrived with a search warrant, not for my house, but for the HOA office in Margaret's home. I'd sent him the developer meeting footage earlier, along with a detailed dossier of the HOA's illegal activities. As police swarmed the neighborhood, Margaret was pulled from her car, her protests echoing down Maple Lane. This is a setup. I'll sue you all, she screamed as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. For the first time in months, I felt the weight on my chest lift. The nightmare was unraveling. Susan stayed with me as I gave my statement, handing over hours of footage. Tom and Henry's break-in, their document theft, the planted drugs, and Margaret's bribe-taking. When you first told me about this, Susan admitted, I thought you were overreacting. But it's a criminal enterprise. I nodded, exhausted but clear-headed. They underestimated the wrong guy. That night, alone in my house, I sat in my basement command center watching police search Margaret's home and the HOA office on my monitors. My Viper's Nest protocol had worked flawlessly, capturing every illegal act with time-stamped, tamper-proof evidence. I'd sent copies to the district attorney, the state attorney general, and 2 investigative journalists I trusted. The HOA's corrupt empire was collapsing, and there was no escape for Margaret, Henry, or Tom. The next morning, I walked through Crestwood Meadows, the neighborhood buzzing with gossip. Neighbors who'd shunned me now stared, some with guilt, others with curiosity. At a coffee shop, I met Javier Morales and Ellen Friedman, who'd both risked their own comfort to help me. You did what none of us could, Javier said. I wish I'd fought harder when they came for me. Ellen nodded. They scared us into silence. You broke that. Over the next week, the fallout intensified. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen pending investigation, and residents demanded answers. An emergency community meeting was called, packing the clubhouse with nearly every Crestwood homeowner. I sat in the back, letting the chaos unfold. Linda Monroe, the HOA secretary, had cut a deal with prosecutors, spilling details of Margaret's scheme. She confirmed what my evidence had already shown: systematic embezzlement, harassment of problem residents, and a secret plan to sell the Eastern Park for $1 million without community approval. When my name came up, the room turned to me. Javier stood, his voice firm. Daniel Harper deserves to tell his side. I hesitated, then walked to the front, feeling oddly calm. The anger that had driven me was gone, replaced by a quiet resolve. I didn't want this fight, I began. All I asked for was transparency and fairness. I connected my laptop to the projector and played a 5-minute video I'd edited. Margaret changing my locks, Henry stealing documents, Tom planting drugs, intercut with their secret meetings about kickbacks and a land sale. The quick cuts, paired with captions, drew gasps and murmurs. One clip showed Henry opening a safe in my office, only to be dusted with fine powder I'd rigged as a trap. He coughed, cursing, while Margaret clutching a designer scarf, eyed my fake investment portfolio greedily. Harper's sitting on millions, her voice boomed through the speakers. We can squeeze him for more than the fund. The footage ended with their plan to frame me and force me out. Silence gripped the room. They didn't just target me, I said. 6 families were driven out over 4 years using these tactics. The special fund was a lie to cover their land deal, with kickbacks for themselves. Officer Thompson took the mic, detailing the charges: fraud, breaking and entering, evidence tampering, and extortion. Mr. Harper's evidence cracked this case, he said. We found fraud going back 5 years. The meeting shifted to practicalities, electing an interim HOA board. Susan was nominated as temporary president, her legal expertise a natural fit. I slipped out, needing air. Walking through the park, the same one Margaret planned to sell, I reflected on the fight. It wasn't the vengeful thrill I'd once imagined, but a deeper satisfaction. I protected my home and exposed a predator. Back home, I dismantled parts of my command center, scaling back to normal monitoring. The eagle-shaped camera on my bookshelf blinked green, signaling routine surveillance. For the first time, Crestwood felt like home. But the battle wasn't over. The legal process loomed, and I knew Margaret wouldn't go quietly. Still, I won the first round, and that was enough for now.